All right, check it out. I don't know how to do any editing on here. I'm not very tech savvy. So I need to do everything in one take. And this is like my 10th attempt to try to record this video. And I'm starting to lose my mind. And not only that, I'm recording this video because my wife and my kid just left the house. And my house is a complete disaster. So I like things in order. But I'm just going to give you guys like a quick, tiny little tour. Like, this is my office right here, just filled with crap on the dining room table. I'm gonna bring you into the kitchen. I don't know if you can see it, but there's just a random pot on the floor. Why is there a pot on the floor? And then we turn the corner, and this is like my son's little play area, and there's just stuff everywhere. And to someone like me, that drives me nuts. But I'm going to take a deep breath. It's okay. I'm going to try to get through this video without stumbling too much. And let's get to it. So this assignment is going to be like the last week where you have an outline and you need to fill in the missing words. Hopefully it's a little easier this time. I put the words that are missing in red so they're easier to find. I'm going to try to share my screen with you guys. This hasn't been working, but let's see what happens now. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully you guys have it on your screen. So we learned about World War I, and that's going to lead us into learning about Hitler and the Nazis, and eventually the Holocaust. So for this lesson, we're just going to start with his early life. And he was born in 1889 in a small town in Austria. So the Nazis, and when Hitler becomes the leader of Germany, he wasn't even from Germany. But the town that he was born in, if you look at the map, it's that town that says Braunau am Inn. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's right next to Germany. And it actually used to be a part of Germany. Hitler frequently clashed with his father. His father used to beat him. And Hitler wanted to be an artist when he was younger, but his dad thought that was kind of a joke, that there was no way to make money off of that, and he was kind of living in a fantasy world. He was a quiet kid as a teenager. He was kind of emo. He just stayed to himself, was quiet in school, and just painted his pictures. And he also showed an interest in German nationalism. So he had a lot of German pride because, again, he considered himself German even though he was born in Austria-Hungary. Hitler eventually drops out of school when he's only 15. 4 years later, after his mother dies, he moves to Vienna, Austria. So this is like the big city to him. He kind of lived like a bum. He was homeless for a while, and he just got by selling paintings to tourists, and he was living off the money his mom left him. He applied to art school twice, but was rejected. And a lot of people think that some of his hatred towards Jews was because he was rejected from this art school that was ran by Jewish people. But there's a lot of reasons why Hitler and the Nazis didn't like Jewish people. The Jewish people were very unpopular for most of history in Europe because, as my the Roman Empire spread Christianity throughout Europe, and it kind of stayed that way even after the Romans kind of got wiped out. Christianity still survived. So the Jews were always like a weird group of people that always lived with themselves, and they were just different from everyone else because of their religion. Hitler moves to Germany. So he goes to Germany right before the beginning of World War I, and he ends up joining the German army. And it turns out he was actually a pretty good soldier. He wasn't doing most of the fighting, but he was constantly putting his life on the line by having to send messages from one unit to another. And so he was constantly dodging bullets, and he was injured a couple times, and he received some awards for his bravery. Like most Germans, Hitler was shocked by the fact that Germany surrendered. So a lot of Germans, including Hitler, felt like Germany could have won the war if they just stayed in it a little longer, even though the reality was that they were really suffering. But a lot of the Germans felt that it was the politicians who gave up, and it wasn't the actual people of Germany that wanted to give up and actually lost the war. So he found the whole treaty that was signed at the end of the war to be humiliating, especially for the fact that Germany had to accept blame for starting the war. Because if you guys remember, the beef really began between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. But Germany, for whatever reason, was forced to say it was our fault, probably because they're the first ones that actually got aggressive, but it really wasn't all their fault. So there was a lot of resentment from Hitler and people in Germany that thought like him. So Germany's going through a rough time at this point. After the war, Hitler is working for the army, and he's forced to spy on political parties that start to pop up. And he starts spying on this party known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And if you shorten that, they're called the Nazis. So the same way we have Republicans and Democrats and political parties in our country, the Nazis were just a political party. And he liked the fact that they were anti-Semitic, meaning anti-Jewish, anti-communist. So if you're a communist, you believe that the government should kind of control everything, that, no one really owns their property. It's all owned by the government. Everyone is supposed to make the same amount of money. The government determines what you do for a living and controls everything. The Nazis were also against the Treaty of Versailles. I don't know if you can see this thing popping up on my screen, but it's getting annoying. Anyway, eventually, he's the one who actually designed the swastika, or the swastika always existed, but he's the one who put it as the logo for the Nazi Party. The swastika is actually a symbol from ancient India, and it's a peace symbol, but he kind of tilted it a little bit and put the red and white background, and that's what the Nazis went with. Eventually, he gained attention and rose up the ranks in the party because he gave such passionate speeches. He was a really good speaker, and people would want to listen to him when he spoke. And he would talk about the Treaty of Versailles, rival politicians. He would knock on communists and especially Jewish people. And by 1921, he becomes the leader of the party. So in 1923, Hitler actually gets arrested because he led a coup d'etat, and that means he tried to overthrow a local government in one of the big cities in Germany. So he thought that he was going to take over City Hall and that the cops would have his back. It turned out not so good for him. And he ends up going on trial. And the media, meaning like the newspapers, made a big deal out of his arrest. And they were constantly covering his court case. And he kind of used this as an opportunity to talk about all his beliefs, including, the fact that Germany was in such bad shape because of the Jews were messing everything up, and that they needed to get rid of the Jews. And a lot of people kind of agreed with him. I mean, he wasn't only speaking about hating Jewish people, but everything that he was saying, a lot of people thought that he was right. And so he ends up being charged with treason, which is a crime against your country. Usually you're supposed to be put to death for that. He was only sentenced to 5 years, but only served for actually 9 months because the judges actually liked him and knew that they had to get him in some sort of trouble. But a lot of these judges and the people that arrested him actually agreed with him. And while he was in prison, he wrote his famous book, Mein Kampf. And when you translate that into English, it means my struggle. So I'm just going to give you the main ideas of what he wrote about in his book. So he talks about his childhood and his time living in Vienna. And he says that Vienna disgusted him because there were so many different races of people mixing together. He felt that humans were divided into different categories based on their appearance. And he thought that German people with light skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes were a part of something known as the Aryan race. The Aryan race is like this mythological race of like the original, what's supposed to be the original white people. He also says that Aryans are the superior or master race, and that Jews and Slavic people are inferior races. So remember, Jews aren't a race of people. You can be any race and be Jewish, just like you can be any race and be Christian. You can be any race and be Muslim. But Hitler kind of spun it like they were a different kind of people altogether. And Slavic people, if you look at the map on here, Slavic people come from the countries that are highlighted in red. They're just from a different part of Europe. Most people probably can't tell the difference between a Northern European and an Eastern European. They're just a bunch of white people, but Hitler thought that they were different. He also believed that the Aryan race was dominant and that they shouldn't marry other races because it makes the bloodline, it taints the Aryan bloodline and makes the actual race weaker. He also thought that it was the Aryans' duty to conquer inferior races. So in nature, you have the survival of the fittest, where the best creatures are supposed to be the ones that survive. And he feels like out of the human species, it should be the Aryans to take over because they're the best. And he also talks about how there's a Jewish conspiracy to control the world and how they control the media and control what people think. And he thinks that life is a big struggle for world domination between Aryans and the Jews. So eventually this book becomes something that people in Germany have to read. But when he first made it, it really wasn't all that popular. I've never read it, but apparently it's not really well written. All right, there you go.